Wow. I just finished recording for over an hour with a dear friend of mine, Jeffery Olsen. His near-death experience will have you pulling out the tissues, but what he learned from that will speak to your heart in a way you won't believe. Stay with us for the full time together because the nuggets of wisdom go right up to the end. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Messages of Hope. It is my great joy to bring on the air today a man who's become a friend of mine by meeting him at several conferences, feeling his heart, his genuinity, if that's a word, genuineness, right? He has quite the story to tell and a lot of wisdom that he's gained from that story. Let's just dive right in. We'll bring him on to the screen and we'll tell you why he's with us today. Jeffery Olsen, welcome to the show.
Gosh, Suzanne, it's so good to be with you, and it's an honor to be in your presence, even over Zoom. But thank you for having me. I look forward to this.
You're sweet, but that's how I feel about you as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were talking beforehand, what's the focus of this talk today? And it's about your story, but it's about the subject of finding inner strength, and it's about perseverance through adversity. It's also about the greater reality and your personal experience in it.
Yes.
Through that adversity. So there's no better place to start than just telling your story. Tell us a little bit about you and then the day that changed your life.
Oh, thank you, Suzanne. Yes, I'm a regular guy. I grew up on a little family farm. My parents divorced when I was young, which was interesting. And I spent time with my mother, in the city, and then my father on the farm. And, rural, hardworking. I still wear cowboy boots most of the time.
Yes, you do.
And yet I did go to college. I went on an athletic scholarship. I played Division I football. I studied while I was there design and marketing, and I was always a creative person. So in my professional life, I'm a creative director. I've worked at ad agencies. I'm now working for a small network, BYU TV, which you can go and download the app for free. There's a plug, but
you go.
Yeah, we do content for families. Free. It's value-based content, everything from reality shows to scripted dramas to the feel-good stuff that brings up some tears and maybe allows one to ask what's really important in life and why am I here?
And I think I spoke or laughed over what was the most important part of what you just said. You said it's value-based.
Yeah, it's value-based.
What are those values?
Yeah, it's not religious. It's not, there is some religious programming, but gosh, we were nominated for 7 Emmys this year in the family and children divisions of the Emmy Awards.
Wow.
And things are going really, really well. We're working with partners like BBC in the UK, and that's what I do. That's my job. That's not necessarily who I am.
But that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm a near-death experiencer. I'm an author. I do a fair amount of speaking, but at this point in life, I'm becoming a recluse. I've moved back home. I'm on the farm with the horses and the cows and the sheep and the chickens, and I'm really enjoying kind of being still for a moment.
I get that. Yay. Well, a family man. Tell us about your family. Let's take us back.
Yeah. Wow. I fell madly in love in college. Young man, and it's interesting for me. I'm not one that dates or, it's just Tamara, my wife, came into the room, and it's like a bolt of lightning hit. It's like, wow, there she is. And I was actually quite shy back then. I think the miracle is that I approached her and introduced myself, and we began talking and became friends. And then it was a romantic interest, and there was a courtship and an engagement, and then a marriage. And
I think it was a soul thing.
It was a soul thing. It was absolutely a soul thing. Now, of course, she was gorgeous and beautiful, and there was all the physical attraction that goes with young love and maybe even mature love. But yeah, it in and of itself was somewhat of a spiritual, mystical experience.
Well, the thing that you said that made it stand out to me was that's not something you would normally do. You wouldn't just go up and approach her and right away when you do something out of the ordinary, you can't stop yourself. That's the soul kind of nudging you. And we'll get to this, but as a result of what happened with you and with Tamara, you're now helping countless people.
Oh, you're so kind, Suzanne. And they're helping me. I always get more than I give. And Tamara and I were very happy. She was teaching high school. She loved her students. I was working in marketing as a creative director and running campaigns and working for, brands like 3M and Intel. And we were pursuing our careers. We had a son come, our first child, Spencer, and that was about 3 years into the marriage. And he was such a joy. We thought, let's have more. But there had been complications, and getting baby number 2, we actually went through in vitro fertilization to get our second son, Griffin, here. But suddenly we had what we felt was a complete family, the 2 boys, she and I, and we were actually preparing to celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary, and it was the Easter weekend. And we had all piled into the car to take a family trip to southern Utah, where the beautiful red rocks and the formations of arches and things are in southern Utah. And we were going to spend time with her family down there. They lived in St. George, which is in that area.
Yeah.
And we had a beautiful Easter weekend. Gosh, we had, dinner, we had an Easter celebration. And it was all about the kids. It was all about the family stuff. And, we had a tradition of hard boiling eggs and then coloring the eggs and hiding them out, in the garden and letting the kids search for eggs. And we made Easter baskets and all that goes with it. And it was a very joyful celebration. Griffin, my youngest, was just a toddler at the time. And I'll always remember, him out in the garden looking for the eggs, and he was just learning to walk. So he was stumbling, he'd crawl a little bit, he'd pull himself up, he'd take a few steps, he'd fall down, slobbering and all that the toddlers do. But he would find these colored eggs and he would bring them to me. And he was just saying a few words, but he could say, Dad, Dada, ball. He thought the eggs were balls, or he was calling them balls. And based on what happened, those things are engraven in your heart. It's not just a memory. It's like, wow, I'll always hold that dear. And Monday morning came, and it was time to go home, and we said our goodbyes and hugged everyone. We put everyone in the car. I buckled the kids in their car seats and safely, and put the cases in the back, and we were just getting ready to leave. And you talk about these soul things, these intuitions. I
got the goosebumps even before you tell me. And I look down at the clock, and here where I'm recording this, it's 111.
111. Look at the numbers. Those are these little winks from the divine.
Yeah.
But here we were, I had put the car in drive. We were just pulling away from the curve, and Tamara actually said, wait, stop. I thought she'd forgotten something in the house, and I stopped the car, and she looked at me and she said, I just want to say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Now, in that moment, we get goosebumps now. In that moment, I thought, oh, women, we've hugged, we've said goodbye. I got to get back to work. We've got to get on the road. But I watched and I noticed, and of course, this is hindsight, but I watched as she got out of the car, she ran up to the porch, and there were her mom and dad, grandma and grandpa waving at the grandkids as they do. But I watched as Tamara not only hugged them, but she kissed them. I watched her hug and kiss her mom and dad, and then joyfully come running back to the car and jumped in and buckled up. And she had listened to that whisper, that spirit thing, for me to say, boy, introduce yourself to that girl. And now she was whispering or listening to the whisper of, gonna hug Mom and Dad one more time. And she did. Now we headed for the interstate. I put the car in cruise control, cranked it up to 75 miles an hour, and away we headed for home. And there was a moment even in that situation. I'm driving, and interesting enough, Tamara she had reclined her seat back. She was sound asleep, and she was still holding onto my hand, so I'm driving and she's holding my hand. And that was I'm like, wow, 10 years into this marriage, and she's still holding my hand, like when I had a couple extra dollars and took her to the dollar movie in college. and the kids were in the back, and I just glanced in the rearview mirror to look at traffic. And I noticed Griffin, my baby son, and he was sound asleep in his car seat too. And it's just a moment, it's like time almost stops. It was just a glance, but as I glanced and saw him, I noticed how long his eyelashes were.
Hmm.
And I thought, what a delightful child. What a beautiful boy. And I could hear Spencer, my oldest son. He was 7 at the time, and he was playing with little action figures he had gotten in his Easter basket and having, making all the joyous noise of a little boy having the grandest, lightsaber battle of the universe. And there's Tamara holding my hand. Anyway, it was this moment of absolute gratitude. And I'll never forget that as I'm driving. This moment of gratitude. Wow, look what I'm surrounded with and surrounded within. It was about an hour after that. There was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a red pickup truck driving erratically, on the interstate. One of the most difficult things of the story is I believe I dozed off.
I've been on that highway. It's a long stretch of nothing.
It's a long stretch of nothing. And,
Yeah.
And there's no excuse or reason. I've thought about a young father, and what we do as men and women as well. You're working, you're trying to raise kids, you're going 12, 14, 16, 18 hours a day. I may have dozed off at the wheel, Suzanne. I may have just nodded off, but for whatever reason, the car swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left. I lost control, and the car began to roll. Not off the interstate, but down the concrete at 75 miles an hour. It was a horrific automobile accident.
Oof. Yeah.
I blacked out for most of that. I was aware that, we're rolling. I blacked out. When the car came to a stop, however, I was incredibly conscious. The first thing I heard was my 7-year-old crying hysterically in the back seat. And I thought, gosh, I've got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. And that's when I realized that I could not move. I was pinned either to the floorboard or the seat. I couldn't tell. There was the smell of gasoline, all the broken glass. I was struggling to breathe. I was in intense pain, but the adrenaline was so huge. I wasn't aware of my injuries. What had actually happened is that both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. The left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. The right leg had to be completely rebuilt. There's 6 pins in a plate holding it together today. My back had been broken in a couple of places. Ironically, the spinal column had not been damaged. It was kind of L4 and L5 had been cracked, but it did not paralyze me. My rib cage was damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had almost been torn off. And then the seatbelt had cut through and ruptured all my insides. I was not aware of my injuries, the adrenaline. I had to get to my boy who was crying. But that's when I realized no one else was crying. And I became aware in that moment that Tamara, my beloved, and that Griffin, my little toddler son, that they were gone, that they had passed. I knew it. I saw it. I won't go into the graphic details, but that was the darkest, most horrific place a man could ever be. I mean, here I am pinned. I can't move. I've got a hysterical child in the back seat who I believe is okay based on the cries. I know half the family's gone. And I was driving the car. I can't even, to touch on the guilt, the regret. I kept thinking, can't I have those 3 seconds back? What happened? What happened? And I only share that because it was in that dark, dark moment of despair that I felt light come. Literally light. It felt like light came to me, like light surrounded me, like light was holding me and comforting me in this horrific situation. It felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And suddenly I was okay. I could breathe. Apparently, the pain was gone. I was very much alive, but I believed my soul had left the body. Here I am in this light, and I'm incredibly alive, incredibly aware. The pain and the trauma is gone. I was aware of the accident, but I'm comforted in this light. And then suddenly, Tamara, who I knew was deceased at the scene, there she is in the light with me, and she's gorgeous. She's radiant. There's no injuries. There's nothing about the accident. She's absolutely divinely beautiful. And she begins to communicate me that you can't stay. Jeff, you've got to go. You've got to go. You can't be here. And we literally had a conversation.
Meaning across the veil with her.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, she's there, and it felt quite tangible. Like I could, I mean, the tears, she was upset. It was strange because I was comforting her, she's crying, and yet the experience was, wow, I can experience the tears. I can taste her tears. I mean, it was.
Was she upset about the situation, or that you were there with her?
No, she was upset about the situation, that
Okay.
I was to go back,
Yeah.
that I could not stay. I was to go back. Now, it still felt like there was a choice. You know, I was looking at her, and we discussed the fact if I stayed with her, Spencer would be orphaned. But it felt like there was a cosmic contract. It felt like, yeah, I know, I'm going back and you're staying here. And it didn't make it easy. That was the most profound goodbye I may ever say.
Huh. This day, is it like dream visits, that it's so solid, it's just absolute, that is reality?
Yes, that's what it felt like. In fact, when I made that transition, if you will, into the light, suddenly it's like, wow, this is real. This is the foggy, crazy dream, the accident, even us sitting and conversing today. Like, this is kind of I'm not going to call life an illusion. I mean, boy, life.
It's very real, right?
And it's real. Yeah. And you experience it. And I feel that's why we came, is to have this human experience. When I say came, because in that other realm, in that light, it felt as if it was home. It felt as if it was an origin. It felt as if it was a place of our origin, at least my origin, on a very personal matter. But we made the choice. We made the choice that I was coming back, and in doing so, said goodbye. And we have no idea how powerful our thoughts are. I didn't have to figure out, well, how do I, how do I go back? How do I get back? I just, the intention, the thought, the consciousness, I'm going back. And then, whew, it's like I was whisked away, and I found myself moving about a busy level 1 trauma center, ER hospital setting.
Oh, wow. So you
Yeah.
went into the light and in the car in the pain, and woke up in the hospital. Yeah.
Yes. And
May I ask, did you ever find out from the ambulance drivers or the EMTs if you had coded, if they knew you had died?
Yeah, I was never actually pronounced dead. I may have coded. In some attempt, and of course, I didn't talk about this for years. I mean, it was almost 10 years after the accident before I really had processed it and was able to talk about it. And getting ambulance crews or records at that point was somewhat problematic. But I was told I never was pronounced dead, that I never actually coded. But that was from my family and hearsay. I can't verify or confirm any of that.
I was just curious, because it doesn't matter. That realer than real experience that you had is it.
Yeah. And
your soul had pulled back from the body, no doubt about it.
Well, it certainly felt like that. And there was no concept of time in this light. I mean, I later found out people arrived at the scene. They were able to assist. There was actually a doctor on the scene that saw to Spencer and apparently saw to me getting air into my lungs somehow. And I had to be extricated from the car, and I was rushed to a local hospital where I was life flighted or airlifted to a level 1 trauma center where they could deal with my injuries. I was unaware of any of that. All I knew is I'd crashed the car. I had said a profound goodbye, and then found myself moving about this hospital. very much aware of the doctors, the nurses, the patients. In fact, acutely aware. I was aware like I've never been aware.
Ah,
Everyone I saw, I knew them. Not that I knew
hmm.
their heart. I knew their soul. I saw them in their magnificence. For instance, a nurse just brushed by, completely unaware of me. Now, once again, my spirit is out of my body. This is my soul wandering around the hospital, I
Okay,
suppose.
you're not just in the room with your body, you're wandering.
No, I'm moving about freely and experiencing what I call oneness.
Huh.
This nurse passes by, and I, in an instant, know everything about her. I
Hmm.
know her love, her hate, her hurt, her motivations, her joy, her uh, and I also
If I
felt,
could just interject there, this is what those across the veil tell us, that we don't need to talk, and that those of us here can't keep secrets from our loved ones who have passed, because just as you had that experience, Jeff, every one of our loved ones who passes suddenly knows what's in our heart.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I want to add to that, there was no judgment. There was no I mean, you know, this I'm using this nurse as an example. I felt, wow, the abuse she'd experienced as a child, the physical, emotional, sexual abuse. I knew it.
Hmm.
And yet in that very instant, it was like, wow, and look at her magnificence here in a hospital, serving, healing, helping. Everyone I saw, there was this connection of oneness, and it felt divine. It felt divine, like, wow, wow, I see you, I see you, I see you. And I finally came up to a body that I didn't feel anything from, which was odd. And I stepped closer, and that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. But that's not me. I'm having this incredible connected experience, but there's my body. There's the skin suit that is worn through mortality. And yet, Suzanne, there was a reverence. As I looked at my body, I thought, wow, I never realized what a miracle machine. I didn't have to remind my heart to beat or tell my lungs how to breathe or think about it. I saw the body as this incredible temple. I mean, it's like, wow, look at this vehicle that will take me through my mortality. And I had always taken it for granted. I just expected my eyes to see and my ears to hear and my feet to run. And there was a reverence, a very profound reverence as I made the choice again to go back in the body. And again, it was the conscious. I didn't have to figure that out. It was like I'm going in, and then boom, I was back in.
Hmm.
So heavy to the pain, the grief, the guilt, the trauma. Um, Being back in the body was a horrific experience, and I was in the hospital for, wow, over 5 months. I had 18 surgeries in all. I was in ICU for extended times. I would throw pulmonary emboli and had horrible infections. And I really should not be here, but I am. And we pulled through in such a way that
And there you were, this college football player, big guy riding horses, counting on your strength, and you have one leg is amputated, the other one, and then almost severed your arm. Just
yeah,
that's the physical aspects, and then there's the death of your wife and son.
yeah. None of the physical stuff even held a candle to the grief
Yeah.
and the trauma of having half the family pass. But there was trauma. It was like, wow, I'm going to be in a wheelchair, and I didn't know. I didn't know what this was going to look like, and so much of it I was unconscious for. I mean, there's an incredible story. Family. I mean, family. My brothers, my mom, my dad. They showed up for me in such a way. Even my coworkers and friends showed up. But they were attempting to save the limbs, the legs. And what had happened in the left leg is it had become gangrenous. They could not keep blood flow in it. And that's what caused the amputation. Obviously, the trauma to the leg, but
So that wasn't immediate. That was
about 5 days in, I think. And I'm told the story of my brothers who, gosh, they practically lost their jobs to be there in the hospital with me. And they're still my dearest friends, my heroes. But they were told we've got to take the leg. And I was on a bunch of morphine, so somebody had to sign that release form. And my younger brother had played alongside with me all through high school and college football, and he knew what that would mean for me to lose my mobility. My older brother was a trained EMT and law enforcement, men's men, these guys. He's still, my older brother's a full-time firefighter in his 60s.
wow. Wow.
Anyway, they had to make a choice. What they did is they locked arms together and they said, we'll both sign the form.
Oh, wow.
We don't have to do this individually. We'll both sign it, because the doctor had told them, either we take the leg tonight or you bury him this weekend. It's your choice.
That's no choice.
So they chose my life. Now, at this point, maybe I'd have rather gone to the other side, even though I'd made that deal.
But you have Spencer.
I had Spencer. That was my motivation. I had this son. I was going to raise this boy. We were not going to orphan him. But that's a little insight to, the physical trauma, but the emotional trauma was far more. And perhaps at the end of my hospital stay was the most profound out-of-body experience. I had gone through ICU and into surgical recovery, back to ICU. But at this point, I was in the rehabilitation wing. I was literally just a few weeks from going home. And I fell into a deep sleep one night. They had finally stabilized my abdominal injuries to the point where they'd put a colostomy. They had been able to stitch some things up. I was able to lay on my side without spilling my guts out. And I'd laid so long on my back, the back of my head, I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. It was bald. And this particular night, I laid on my side and I realized I'm sleeping, which is funny to realize in your sleep that you're sleeping. But in that state of mind, that light came again, just like at the accident. This light came. And I was grieving so miserably, the loss of my son, the loss of my wife. And I realized never lost, but you grieve it. Yeah. You want the physicality of them here. And again, it felt as if I rose above the hospital bed. And yet this time the light dispensed. It went away, and I was in the most beautiful place. I was in the most incredible place, and I began to run. I was whole. I had both feet and both legs. And the physicality of it was so strange. In fact, I was even wondering, wow, I'm out of the body, I'm free, but I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my toes. I could feel the intelligence in my calves and thighs. I had that overwhelming feeling again that I'm home. I'm home. I've gone back to the origin. I'm home. This place is so welcoming, so familiar. And I began to run. And then I got the message that I was not there to stay.
May I interrupt for a second? And for those who may be new to the whole NDE phenomena, what differentiated this from a dream? How do you know that wasn't a dream?
Gosh, it was so physical. I mean, I have dreams. I'm a dreamer of dreams, and I do have vivid dreams. And I've even had dreams that feel very meaningful when I wake up. But this, I was very much awake. I mean, I wasn't, I mean, it was so real, so tangible. And I mean, it's been 26 years, Suzanne, and I can recall it like it was yesterday. It never, I can't tell you what I dreamed maybe a week ago, but this is so, it was so real. Mm-hmm. It was so real. And as I got that message, I was there just temporarily, in this new reality, if you will. There was this corridor to my left. I knew intuitively I'm to go that way. And I did. I began working my way down the corridor. And as I did, there was a crib at the end of the corridor. Now, Griffin, my little son, had been sleeping in a crib. He was only 14 months old at the time of the accident. And I rushed to this crib and I looked in it, and there was my little boy sleeping as peacefully as he was when I glanced in the rearview mirror of the car. And I swept him up in my arms. Now, this is where it was so not like a dream. Have you ever picked up a sleeping child? I mean, the weight, the
It's
heat.
just heavy. Yeah.
It was that.
Huh.
And I could feel him, and I held him against me, and the warmth, and I could feel him breathing. I could feel his breath on my neck. I could feel his little rib cage expanding. And I leaned over and I smelled his hair. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if you've ever smelled the hair. I mean, it was so tangible, so real. And of course, I'm weeping, holding him. And I began to feel this presence coming behind me, this overwhelming, cosmic, powerful presence. Now, I grew up in a Christian household, and I'm thinking, wow, that's God. That's God. And I'm in so much trouble. I mean, my little boy is here because I fell asleep at the wheel and crashed the car, and this presence is coming closer and closer. And I'm holding my boy thinking this is all my fault. And the presence came so close, and I had the thought, I hope I can be forgiven. And in that moment, and this almost felt tangible too, these divine arms wrapped around and held me and my son. And it's like we just melded into this oneness again. This suddenly it's like I became connected with the divine. And yes, my life flashed before my eyes, they say, but it was more like a life review. I saw things in my life, and I was the one judging it. I would say, well, that was a mistake. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. And this divine being, I call it God, said, yeah, but what did you learn? What did you learn in that experience? And I saw things, I said, well, I knew that was wrong, and I did it anyway. And in those arms, I was told, it was communicated, not by words, but it was just flowing through my whole presence.
It was like the title of your book, Knowing.
Yeah, yes, knowing. It was like, well, that's your judgment of it, not ours. You are as precious. And this was a very personal experience, but I knew I was as precious in the arms of the divine as my little boy was in my arms.
Mm.
He was perfect to me. He was beloved. He was divine. And yet I was experiencing that in multiplicity in the arms of God. And the love.
Could I interrupt, Jeff? Every single one of the daily messages, 6,000 of them I've gotten now over the years, ends with the words, "You are so very loved." And some people say, why do they say that? Because that's what the divine wants us all to know. And you had the personal experience of that. And people don't feel worthy of that. But what you're describing, it comes with the knowing that we're all worthy of it, because we can't not be, because we are divine no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, I still get emotional, Suzanne. I mean, I was like, it was such a personal experience. Like, wow, the love, the unconditional love. And yet I knew that rippled out to every living soul. I knew there was so much love. And this was interesting in all that. And I'm holding my son. God says to me, I want you to exercise your will. Now, given my upbringing, I'm like, no, wait a minute. It's your will be done. I know this. And I sometimes hesitate to share this. What I was told is, my will is your will. That's how much we love you. My will has always been that you have free will. And I was told, you can be mad at God your whole life because this was allowed to happen. The car didn't stop, and I was told I could beat myself up the rest of my life because I was driving. But I was given this different choice. I was told, you can give your son, you can exercise your will and hand him over. give him over in trust.
Hmm.
And in all that peace and in all that beauty and all that love and all that presence, I kissed my little boy and I handed him over. I gave him back. He wasn't mine. I gave him back. And of course, then, back to the consciousness of the hospital bed. Suddenly I'm back in the hospital room and in the bed, and the amputation and the colostomy and the arm. And I mean, I was a sight. My left leg was amputated. My right leg was in a brace, holding it straight out. My right arm was in a sling. All I had was the one operating left, hand, but I had a different insight. It didn't heal me. I still grieved as miserably as anyone would grieve, but it changed me. It changed me in a way where I suddenly knew love was the answer. Love was what I am. Love is what God is. Love is what we are as humanity if we simply choose it, if we lean into it and presence it.
How did that change the bitterness you felt and your lack of self-forgiveness at that point?
Honestly, Suzanne, it took years. I mean, I had this experience, and yet it took years. I mentioned I never even wrote the book till almost a decade after the accident. And I think part of it was carrying that, what if, is it my fault? I mean, I knew what I knew, but the ego and the mind is a horrible thing sometimes for me. My heart and my soul had this experience, and yet I still grappled with it, and I still grappled with grief. And I can now say in hindsight, it was one thing to have an external validation. I mean, held in the arms of the divine and told how beloved I am and we all are was one thing, but it was still an external source of love. It wasn't until that love came from the inside, from inside me, from me loving and forgiving myself and holding myself in that divine energy, that I would ever heal. I mean, even, I call him the great master. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And I had forgotten about that self-love. I'd become really good at loving my neighbor. But until the love came from within me, for me, could it then truly ripple out and allow forgiveness, to forgive, to give as before, to give beforehand, to literally put things back in place and put the pieces back in for wholeness. And so and it's still a challenge. I mean, there are days it's like, wow, why'd I do that? Why'd I say that? I remind myself continually, and gosh, had I not had the profound out of body or near death experiences I had, I may very well be that guy strung out on the street corner wondering what happened. Judgment kind of goes out the window.
That's a really good point. Yeah. It didn't provide instant healing of the grief. You didn't instantly forgive yourself, but there was that underlying, like the title of your book, knowing that there's something beyond this pain.
Right. And the experiences buoyed me up, carried me through. I mean, I think it's interesting because Spencer, my son, 7-year-old, a child, and he was banged up. He was held for, I think, a night or two in the hospital for observation, but he basically walked away from the accident. But he had no near-death experience, no spiritual visitation. He didn't get to say goodbye. Boy, he navigated this as a little boy. In fact, he came to me in his adolescence. He was probably 19. He was a young adult. I mean, and he said, Dad, I don't get it. You speak of these profound out-of-body experiences, these near-death experiences, these dreams and visions. And because it continued, I had after-death communication with with Tamara and Griffin in different ways. But Spencer's like, I didn't get anything. He's like, I never had an experience. He was quite emotional. He's like, Dad, I prayed. I beat my knuckles bloody on this thing you called the divine and God, and I got nothing. All I wanted to do was see Mom. I just wanted to hold her. I just wanted to have, and here's this young man that was now taller than I am and grown. And he's saying, I never had any of that.
And yet, you and he have recently co-authored a book about what you've learned from this and how you've grown together.
Yeah. And we've been very
close to segue into that.
Yeah. We've become very close, Spencer and I. And he now lives 6 minutes away. He bought a little gentleman's farm. He's got a horse and some chickens and dogs. But yeah, as he grew up, as he fell in love, as he married, and I've got a grand baby son coming in the end of this month.
Oh, congratulations. Wow.
And anyway, Spencer, my son, in fact, he said this early on. Gosh, he got involved in after school rock and roll programs for kids that were struggling. He was in Big Brothers, Big Sisters. He worked with helping parents heal, for helping siblings heal, those that had lost, siblings. But he became a very compassionate man, having not had the experience. In fact, at one point, shortly after he came to me and said, I got nothing, he said, what if I'm God's hands? What if I'm God's light? What I didn't get what you got. I didn't have that experience. And he said, maybe I get to be that in life.
All of us. That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've co-written this book, co-authored it. And I worked with him. We did, but it's titled, Where Are You? Where are you? And it was his cry as that innocent 7-year-old child. Gosh, I've looked in the kitchen. I've looked in the garden. I've looked in the stars. I've looked in the sky. I've looked everywhere. Where are you? You're not here. And yet, not to give the book away, but it's got a profound, beautiful, we called it a children's book. I guess it's got a message for everybody who misses someone, but it's that finding them within you. And there's an underlying thing that may even hint at the divine. I mean, I think we all have moments in our life. Even as a Christian, Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me now? Where are you? And I've had moments in my life where I've cried that out. And the point is, it's within me. It's within us. We might be crying for the divinity, the divine, where are you? And yet it lives within each of us. I am that. And you are that. And we are that. I am that. I am. And that's a profound message in a simple little book that was written for children. But we've had many people say, wow, there's something much deeper here if you're open to it.
It has a beautiful feel to it. And I love that message gets out to children in a pretty much a non-denominational way, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's nothing religious about the book at all. It basically says, hey, they live within us. It all lives within us, and therefore it's alive in everything. And as we awaken to that, the beauty and the joy and the awe and wonder of being alive here, even when loved ones have moved on, we can.
But this would be a great book for parents and grandparents to read to young children when they're trying to understand death.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. And we purposely didn't make it. There's nothing in there that talks about heaven or they're in a better place. Spencer was very adamant about that. He's like, I was a little boy. And everyone would say, your mom's in a better place. And he'd say, no, she's not. Her place, the best place would be for her to be here with me. He's a very deep young man and has become now a very deep grown man. But yeah, he didn't buy that. She's not in a better place. I want her here with me, kissing me on the forehead and tucking me in at night. That's the best place for her to be. So he was very real about that. So he's been very, as we co-authored it, yeah, very
So
non-denominational.
how did he come to his understanding of that when he didn't have those experiences? Was it partially from you having, from him having heard you speak so many times publicly, or just his own searching?
No, he had his own awakening. I mean, he's become he sends me all the time. He'll send me things on being present, you know, and things on he took his own deep dive into his own personal growth, his own personal awakening, his own personal thinking, or I should say mindfulness, a way of being. And he found it there. And he still hasn't had a huge visitation. However, he now recalls being a young boy, like 13, 14. He says he was at a Boy Scout camp. And he said, I did have a dream. And he said, in the dream, my mother came and told me how much she loved me. But he wrote that off as a young boy, angry because it wasn't real. It was a dream.
Yeah.
You know, he expected a full apparition to show up in his room and you know, some of that.
I think we all do because we want it so badly, but those dreams can be profound.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, he's become quite a beautiful man, a magnificent man.
He's very quiet, introspective, but definitely an inner strength that you see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And speaking of seeing, you were talking earlier in the hour about how when you came out of your near-death experience, you saw the divine in everyone. You couldn't help but see it. The way you were talking, it's clear that you still see that, perhaps not as strongly as you did at first, but I've met you numerous times, and you're exactly like you're coming across here: gentle, loving, kind. How does that compare with who you were before? I would imagine you were still pretty much the same.
I've always been kind. But gosh, before the near-death experience, I mean, I was a red personality: go, fight, win, you know, get the job, get the girl, get the house, get the car. I was probably far more aggressive, if you will. This has gentled me, and the physical injuries. Gosh, it was not about my physicality anymore.
Yeah, it couldn't be. Yeah,
it became about my spirituality far more. And
so just people might be interested. You have a prosthesis, and you do have a limp, but you get about without any assistance.
Yeah, I've healed miraculously. I eventually I got out of the wheelchair. I was fit with a prosthetic limb. I learned to walk again. We did rehabilitation on the shoulder, where I have almost 65% of it. I can't throw a ball really well because the rotator cuff was so messed up, but I have healed miraculously. And I walk, and I've realized that when I was learning to walk on the prosthesis, you have to put weight on the heel to lock the knee. And then when you rotate the weight on the toe, that releases the hydraulic. And so every step was a conscious process.
Is it still?
Yeah, but
really?
It's become muscle memory. It's become muscle memory. And yet in that process, I realized every step is a miracle. Every step is a gift. And that's one of the things in the arms of the divine that I want to share. I grew up believing that life was a test. I was probably failing it, certainly, you know. And in the arms.
So why did you think you were failing?
Well, you know, because I had
family and you're the family man and good job. Why did you feel you were failing?
Oh, because I've made plenty of mistakes, Suzanne.
Oh,
I've made plenty of things that were not necessarily in my own integrity, or I wish I'd have done that different, or why'd I say that? I have a temper. I would lose my temper. Part of it is just, you know, maybe me in this guilt complex, but even my thoughts, I'd think, wow, that's not a really nice thought. Why, you know, so this self-judgment,
very human.
very human. It's a human experience. But in the arms of the divine, I realized life is not a test. It's a gift. It's a gift. Even those feelings and those thoughts, that human experience is not a test. It's a gift that we might experience all those emotions, all those feelings, all those challenges, And what it does is it expands the soul. I continue to have challenges in my life. If I was to say, "Oh yeah, it's easy now," no, 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 no. I'm experiencing things that are as hard as anything I've ever done, and yet I realize it's providing a deeper capacity for love, a deeper capacity for empathy, a deeper capacity for even self-acceptance in many ways, and self-love. And that's a gift. That's why we came. That's why we're doing what we do, and that's why it's challenging.
Jeff, my executive producer, Lynette Setscorn, she goes through these videos and she pulls out these 1-minute shorts, which are just divine, the way she puts them together with imagery and music and everything. But I can just feel her when she watches this one. She's going to be going, "Oh, we got to get that." I think you've given us like 20 these wonderful nuggets of wisdom to just keep coming back and hit. They loop around. So everybody, you're going to want to look for the shorts from this episode and just go, "Okay, we'll just play that one over and over till I finally get it. I am divine now." Right?
Oh, you're so kind, Suzanne. And you bring that out. You create, I mean, you and I have sat together like physically, and you bring out the best in all of us. And that's
just that heart-to-heart connection that you can't help but feel when you sit in that presence. And I didn't have to die to have it happen. Thank you. It's just through my stepdaughter had to die. That was a soul thing. I know it was. But that causes us to ask those deep questions and to go within. And then once you taste that magnificence and feel that light, you do start seeing people differently. You can't help it. It changes everything.
Well, and the opportunities come. It's like the bar will raise. It's like, okay, I can see strangers that way. Now, how do I see, people that are closer, coworkers, family members, children, spouses? Do I see them that way? And then
how about the people in the headlines that have made choices that we would hope we never make? Can you see the
that's it continues to be a challenge. I'll tell you the biggest challenge for me anyway is to look in the mirror and say, do I see it? Do I see it in myself? And that can be a challenge. That can be a challenge. I was with my middle son, Zach, who I adore. He's a full-grown man now. He came over and we were watching a film on Netflix last night. And this isn't a plug for a film or anything else. And there's a part in there where the star of the show was asked, "Are you a good man or a bad man?" And he said, "I don't know. I don't know." And in that answer, perhaps that's the beauty, is not knowing. I mean, it's odd. My book is titled Knowing, and yet at this point in my life, maybe I don't know anything. And yet I'm comfortable in that. Maybe that is being like a child, is not knowing and being totally comfortable in the
What if, I know they were talking in the movie about our human side, but there is goodness in all of us. We are all both. We're good, and there are choices that are less than good. We all have that potential within us. And we came here for the experiences, and we see, well, did that work? Is that working for you? And then we hopefully choose better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would hold that we are all good. We are all worthy. We are all divine, even in the choices we make, even in the challenges life brings, even in our judgment of others and self. If we can just take a step back and look through a new lens, we might see it differently. We might see it differently.
And it's because we can see through the human lens or the soul's lens. My human side wants to say, as I hear your story, which I knew, and I've heard it before, but it still engenders the same emotion. My human side wants to say, "I'm so sorry you and Spencer had to go through all that." And yet my soul side says, "Here you are. Look what you've learned. Look how you're helping people. Look how you've grown from that." And even in the pain, there's this underlying knowing, this we call it joy. I'm sure there were moments when you said that's not joy, but I glanced down and I have this little picture here. It's joy. And the pillow says joy. It's not the human joy. It goes hand in hand with that experience you had when you were in the light.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all joy and it's all love. And it's the breadth and depth of the human experience. And you know, at some point in this realm, or maybe the realm beyond, we'll sit down, we'll laugh, we'll hug, we'll cry, we'll say, wow, wasn't that a crazy, interesting, beloved,
I was
holy?
going to say, wasn't that interesting? I don't think I wrapped up the point that I was making, that, you know, my human side says, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. My soul side says, it's not sorry or not sorry. It just was an experience. And what did you bring back as a result of it, right?
Right.
What did you learn? It's what you said earlier. That's the point.
The purpose of life is to learn, and you learn by your experiences. And here again, I'm not attempting to be religious here, but I refer to things. You know, here's Jesus being taken to be crucified, right? And biblically, he says, "For this cause came I into the world." Wow. You know, so when we're being challenged, tormented, you know, betrayed, belittled, whatever it is, well, for this cause came I into the world. My soul chose this experience that it might expand, that I might know. And even if I know nothing, there'll be a knowing of that. And perhaps I'll take a step in the direction of knowing who I am, and therefore recognizing who you are, and recognizing the divinity within each of us in a unique and beautiful way.
Beautifully said. If you go to your website, which is Jeffery, Jeffery Olsen, OLSEN.com, you see that there are 3 versions of what is now the latest book, Knowing. Did you rewrite it several times because you kept growing in wisdom?
Not necessarily. What I mean, I never set out to be an author. It's really interesting the way that came about. I barely started talking about it and spoke to a group. And there was a publisher in the audience who came up and said, "You're going to write a book." And I said, "No, I'm not." And that was a Friday. Monday morning, there was a contract in my email for a book.
Wow.
And of course, there's deadlines and pressures, and I had never written. I fancied myself a pictures guy, not a words guy. And anyway, I knew their hearts came out, and it was under a deadline, and we wanted to capture the near-death experience. And I wasn't too concerned because I figured my mom would buy a copy. What did it matter? But in the end, yeah, I think it hit number 3 in the category in the first, 10 days of its release. And I was whisked into a whole new way of life, presenting and talking about the things I didn't want to talk about, or at least was very emotional about talking about. And then the publisher said, "Let's do a second book. Let's do the healing. Let's do, what happened after." And that's beyond mile marker 80. Knowing is a compilation of the two. If you were to go get a book, Knowing would be the compilation of I Knew Their Hearts and Beyond Mile Marker 80, but with extended chapters and some deeper insights. But it includes right up to, the marriage of Spencer and him falling in love. And it's really a personal memoir. It contains the near-death experience. It contains the dreams and the visions and the crazy, things that happen, whether it's you look at the clock and it's 11:11, or that red-tailed hawk shows up in that perfect moment when for you with butterflies,
I just heard some mother, some shining light mom who's watching this, I just heard her gasp because that's her sign. You just said that on purpose. You didn't know it, but you did. Yeah.
Well,
ooh, that was cool.
Was it the butterflies or the red-tailed hawk?
The red-tailed hawk. That was somebody was waiting for that sign. That's cool.
Suzanne, you amaze me. That's how Tamara shows up to me. She shows up to Spencer and I. I mean, I'm not saying she's the hawk, but when she's near, the red-tailed hawk is there.
That's
and
it.
and feathers left and dropped and all kinds of crazy things that you would say, well, that's a coincidence. But there are no coincidences. There are no accidents. And it's a beautiful thing to recognize that. That's what's contained in knowing, just the personal memoir of here's my journey. And wow, is the journey ever over? There's no destination. I'm learning that in my gray-haired old age. There's no destination. It's all the journey, and it's finding joy within that
Yeah.
that brings us peace. That's what brings peace.
Every moment is a destination and a beginning. It's just like every moment, and there's some are bigger than others, and death is a one little transition point, and then there's a new beginning from there. It just goes on, and some people say that's exhausting.
Unless it's exciting.
Oh, that's what the learning is all about. We learn, and then we can get to the point where you wake up in the morning and say, I wonder what I'm going to learn today. And may my lessons be as painless as possible.
Yeah. And pain can be a valuable teacher. But here's the thing too. I mean, maybe it never ends. People, again, in my culture, it's like, well, then you go to heaven and then you rest in peace. It's like, well, that might get boring. What if we say,
so.
what if we want to do something different today? Let's, we want to experience ourselves in a new or a unique way. It's a lot, and it can be mind blowing. But I guess I had a very wise man once tell me that eternity, forever, and I believe we are eternal based on my experience. Eternity is nothing more and nothing less than always forever having right now, this moment.
Yeah.
Just like you said, from moment to moment to moment to moment, and there's a choice in every moment. And we learn from our choices. We have experience from our choices, and that's the point. That's the point.
Yeah. Well, you and I met at an International Association of Near-Death Studies conference, I believe, IANS. I know I'll be speaking at this year's IANS conference in August in Arizona. Will you be there again?
I may be. I don't know yet, but I may well be. And I look forward to that. And gosh, Suzanne, I would come just to hear you speak.
I never tire of hearing you. I know I'll see you at the Helping Parents Heal conference, right?
Yes, I will be there. Absolutely. And that's in Arizona in August as well. So
That's
Arizona's
right.
a hot spot.
Literally.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, what a joy it was to connect with you. I feel like I've just sat and had an hour-long chat with a dear friend, which I have, but I hope that everybody else feels the same way now. And you can all see why I love this man. He's just a wise teacher, a beautiful person, a good man.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I love you, and I send all my best wishes to you and yours. Yeah. And I look forward to when we can sit down again, whether in person or on a Zoom or whatever that looks like. It's a pleasure and a joy and an honor to rub shoulders with you in any way. I think the world of you.
Well, here we are in the Mutual Admiration Society. Thank you, Jeff Olsen. All right, everybody. I hope you're as inspired as I am. I just need to go out and hug everybody. I hope you will too. If you're not a hugger, use these tools of God to spread the love around that you have picked up from this hour together. That's why we're here. Love you all. See you back here next time.